Thanks for tuning in to this Sims 4 speed build. My name is Reblueka, and this week I have built a cottage inspired by the world of Ghibli and Miyazaki. Here I'm just starting to get the general shape of the house. I'm not too concerned about the internal layout. I had an image in my mind of kind of a hodgepodge cottage with a large front yard, lots of big, thick trees, and lots of greenery. I also knew that I wanted there to be parts of the house that stuck out, that would have different types of textures and wallpapers, and that I wanted things to look like they were kind of thrown together over the years. I definitely think that this house has a history, an interesting story, and right now I'm kind of starting to get an idea of what that looks like. I'm figuring out the color of the roof that I wanted, and on the left you could see earlier I've got a wall with some windows on it. I knew before I started that I wanted the architecture to be mostly European, and I mean that as vaguely as possible, but the kind of European that you see in Ghibli movies with a little bit of East and Southeast Asian influences. So I did put windows from Cottage Living, Life and Death, and For Rent on the side because those windows have wonderful wooden swatches, stained glass, elements that I thought would go together really well. So I've placed those on the side just to reference and to pull from them easily. And here I am working on the roof as I figure out the layout. I just had to move it a little bit since when you remove a floor, the roof clips through whatever room you removed a piece of floor from. So that's what I was doing earlier. And here I am kind of starting to put my vision together of the greenery in the front. And it's just kind of thrown together. I'm not really thinking about it too much. And I don't work on the landscaping quite yet, but this kind of gives me an idea of what I wanted for the front. So I've added some vines and a little more greenery to the side of the house here. I actually do end up removing some of it later on because I don't want the house to be too overgrown. I definitely want it to feel natural, but I also want it to feel like it's maintained. The people that live here don't want the vines growing into their windows, so I imagine that they prune them back a little bit. I've also added a path between the front and side yard, and I do love painting with the terrain tool in The Sims 4. I think the brushes are really satisfying and it matches the aesthetic really well. And later on, I will get even more crazy with the terrain tool, and I think it ends up looking really good. Here I'm adding just a little bit more greenery, getting a much better idea of what this house is going to look like in the final product. And one of my favorite things to do is adding little rocks and watching it back sped up. One of the things that I really like about watching other people's speed builds is landscaping. I think watching that on high speed is super satisfying, especially watching rocks shrink as they get put down. So that's really fun to watch back. You might notice that the wallpapers have already been added inside. I did cut out quite a bit of the wallpaper swatch browsing because it just takes me so long to find the ones that I want. And even here, I'm picking out curtains, and I cut out so much footage of me scrolling through the curtain swatches because it just takes me forever, and I somehow want to pull out every single curtain in the catalog and go through every single color just in case it's the right one. Some of them I have an idea of which ones I specifically want to use, but I think because I wanted specific colors in this build, I wanted to make sure that I tested kind of the rich, bright colors on every single curtain type. So just be glad I cut that out because otherwise this video would be 2 hours long. Here I'm working on the kitchen a little bit, cut out all the counter swatch browsing as well. This one, I kind of knew which one I wanted to go to. The counters from For Rent are so beautiful, and I really like the thick slab of stone on top. I feel like it just feels so durable. It also feels really old-timey, which was perfect for this cottage. And I'm not completing each room as I go through them. The type of builder that I am is all over the place, to put it mildly. I did post another video last week, which I didn't include any commentary of. This is actually my first commentary ever. But I learned from doing that video that I really don't stick to one room at a time. So I did use a little bit of editing magic to make it seem like I was spending more time in each room here. The cuts that you're seeing of this living room are an illusion. I was jumping all over the place. And that's mostly because as soon as I find an item that seems more appropriate for like another room, then I'll jump to that room. And once I'm in that room, then I'll spend that time there instead of the original room that I was working on. So I'm curious if other people do the same thing, or maybe people who don't record themselves don't have that awareness, because I certainly didn't know until I started pressing record while I was playing. So I'm adding quite a few plants here to this living room. I have a much better idea of the type of person that lives here, or the type of family rather. I imagine that the adults in the house, maybe it's one adult or two, love plants and they love herbalism. I imagine that that's probably the skill that they work on alongside gardening. If I was playing in this house, I think that's what I do with them. So I've added quite a few plants to the living room, and of course that also adds to the lushness of the yard that they have here. Here I am working a little bit more on the terrain and moving the trees around to kind of get the composition that I wanted. I also wanted the sight lines to be good. So if you are in first person camera mode, or you're closer to your sim, when you're walking around this lot, you'll be able to see the house without it being too obscured by the trees, but it still feels very lush and overgrown. Some more rocks and my favorite to get together shrubbery, I think this house is really starting to figure out its identity. At this point, I had pulled out this thatch roof piece from Cottage Living, and as soon as I added it, I knew that the history of this house was that it was originally a single rectangular stone cottage with a thatch roof that was then built onto over time. And I think that really helps justify the hodgepodgey, thrown together nature of this particular build. And I think it also really captures that Miyazaki style, where when you look at a home or a building in those movies, you really get a sense of the history just by looking at it. You can tell that it's been added to over time, and that there are different architectural elements or different materials that they used over the years. And the colors are also really starting to look more like how I imagined. I didn't want the roof to be completely red, and I do change that top roof section in just a little bit, just to break it up a little bit more. I didn't want the red to be too overwhelming. At this point in the build, I'm figuring out the interests of the protagonists, and while scrolling through the activities section of the catalog, I found the Crystal Creations gemology table, and I pulled that out, and I thought it would be really cool if the child would eventually become interested in gemology. I'm pretty sure kids can't use that table. I think only young adults and older can, or teens and older can. So I thought it would be reasonable if the kid would spend their childhood being out in nature, collecting gems, collecting materials, and then eventually be able to spend time up in that tower creating some really cool crystal creations. As I was painting the ceilings, which you always have to do, make sure to paint your ceilings. It just makes everything feel so complete. I noticed there were a few pieces of the building that were jutting out in ways that I didn't like. I ended up pulling out this little faux balcony from the kids' room and turning it into just a huge planter, which I think is very lovely and cozy. It is on a platform though, so when I've placed this build after testing it, I did notice that the ladder that is right next to that platform does disappear. So just keep in mind that if you do download this from the gallery, which it is available on the gallery, that when you place it, you might need to add the ladder to the top left-hand corner of the kids' room back because the platform next to it, unfortunately, makes it disappear. I've also added another balcony to the front of the house. It was just looking a little bit empty. The roof was looking a little bit too big. I wanted to add more greenery without adding more vines, and I thought, why not add a little balcony with another planter to the front, just like it did on the back. And I think that really helps create the kind of more complete composition for the front and makes the roof seem way less empty compared to the rest of the super detailed parts of the build. Moving on to the living room, I'm adding clutter, lots of books. There's no television in here. The people that live here enjoy their books, they enjoy their plants. They don't really need a TV. I also think maybe the timeline that this cottage exists in maybe isn't as technology heavy as so many Ghibli and Miyazaki movies aren't. And I think it just made more sense to not have it. Of course, you can easily add it. There's plenty of nice picture frame TVs that I think would sit really comfortably above the fireplace to replace that picture from Life and Death. And I'm also just adding a screen back here. I thought it would make it a little extra cozy. I do actually think I like the swatch that I originally went with, the slightly see-through one more. I might change that for my own save file, but the version that I uploaded on the gallery does have that black rose one, but I think it works pretty well too. I'm also adding some more clutter to the kitchen, really just pulling out anything that seems like old-timey, rustic, cottagey, and putting it on the shelves. I think this is a kitchen that I actually spent not that much time on compared to my other kitchens. I think mostly because I knew kind of what I wanted to go for. And I think this is also a kitchen that they don't spend too much time in. It's a little bit darker in there. I think they spend way more time in their living room and outside. So I think that makes a little bit of sense. Now we're back to the kids' room, finally adding some clutter and personality up here. Just adding some cute little toys, some decorations from cottage living. I decided to add the train and steamboat from base game. I thought those were really lovely and fit the aesthetic of the build, and kind of imply that this is a kid that wants to see the world, wants to get out there and explore. So I thought that was a really nice addition. And just scrolling through to see if there's anything that would work well. The little book next to the bear is from the Little Campers kit. I think that's what it's called. It's the only item that I used from that kit, so if you don't have it, it won't be necessary for the build, but it is a very cute little item that implies quite a lot for whatever characters you're building for, so really liked adding that in there. Also just adding some pillows. You might notice that there was a bit of a gap between the bed and the wall when I put those pillows down. I do end up moving the bed a little bit closer. Even though Sims can't fall out of their bed, I imagine that, your arm would get caught between the wall and the bed. So I moved it just for the sake of imagination. I had a spare room that I wasn't using for any of the characters that I had in my mind, so I decided to turn this room into an art studio. And I don't know which character would necessarily use this, but I do love the artist studio kit. I think it's one of the best kits we've ever gotten. The items are just perfect, and I think they work really well regardless of the aesthetic or timeline of your build. It can sit really well in a build from the late 20th century. It also fits really well into our current times and even for older than that. So I'm a big fan of that kit. It's really pretty. The items are really high quality, and it's so easy to create a room with the items in that kit and make it feel really complete. So I was really pleased with how that room turned out. Now we're moving into the final part of the video, which is the landscaping. This is always my favorite part of other people's speed builds, so I've left in quite a bit of footage. Not a whole lot to say about the thought process behind it. I can tell you that I did use a few items from Live Edit. Definitely use the shrubbery from Get Together, which is in Live Edit, as well as the grass and mushrooms from Cottage Living, which is an absolute go-to if you're building something out in the country. It really just adds the extra texture that is missing from the terrain paint and makes it just feel really warm and lovely. And since I don't have much to say about the actual landscaping itself, I just want to take a little bit of time to thank you if you've made it this far into the video. Just want to say I really appreciate it. As I mentioned earlier, this is only my second video ever on YouTube, and it's my first video ever doing commentary, and I've done many attempts trying to get a good recording, doing a lot of research, 30 attempts on my last video. It didn't sound quite right, but I just wanted to bite the bullet and just go for it. I've been watching Sims YouTube for over 10 years, and there have been a lot of people that I've followed who've grown a lot while doing this, and I really admire them. It's something that I've always wanted to do, and I'm finally doing it. So if you're watching, thank you. If you've liked or subscribed, thank you. It's super appreciated, and I'm only just getting started. I'm also only just learning how to do so much of this, so if you have any feedback about the style of the video or the pacing, I am open to hearing that. And also let me know what you think of the actual build. Who do you think would live here? What kind of character would you like to have in this home? Would you use it differently than what I described? Did you have someone else in mind as you were watching this? I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. A lot of my builds are really inspired by characters that I come up with in my head. And I am actually an artist and an illustrator, so my imagination is quite unchecked. And even as I was building this, I had some Miyazaki movies on in the background, but I barely even looked at them. I was so absorbed in the story that I was telling myself in my head about the characters who would live here and what kind of world this is. So if you have anything like that, I'd love to hear about it. Well, that just about wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, a like would definitely be appreciated. If you want to see more, please subscribe. There's definitely more coming in the future. If you'd like to download this build, it is on the gallery. My username is the same as my YouTube username, which is reblueka, Reblueka. And I'm actually not sure how I actually pronounce that. It might be reblueka, it might be reblueka. Well, I'm not sure. Anyway, that's how you spell it. That's where you can find it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.